Hey guys, so checking in. I finished section 3 of the knitting for the shawl. So it's upside down. So section 1 was the main garter section, then we got our first transition section, which was section 2, and then section 3 was the remaining garter knitting in our first contrast colour yarn. Now I actually have a little nugget of yarn left over. I probably could have gotten 2 more rows out of this. I could have done 1 more garter repeat, but I was already at my correct stitch count, like a multiple of 10 between the stitches, as I've mentioned before, and I didn't really want to add an extra row at this point. So I don't mind having a little bit left over for some scrappy projects that I work on, so I decided to stop here. But had I been weighing my yarn as I go, I would have had a better idea of how much yarn I use up for each row, so then I'd know for sure if I'd be able to get another 2 rows out of this yarn or not, because I'm already at 227 stitches now, so already ramping up those stitch counts. So now I'm moving on to section 4, which is our second transition section, but you'll notice I've cut my first contrast colour yarn because we're now finished knitting with this colour. So we're going to start our next transition section with our second contrast colour yarn, which I have right here. And so I'll be doing 1 garter repeat in this, then I'll be bringing the main colour yarn back in to do the actual transition pattern rows and alternating between those. And then once that section is finished, I'll be knitting the following section, which will be section 5, which will be the next garter section out of this second contrast coloured yarn. So that's what I'm going to do now. Like I said, it's going to be basically repeating this a couple more times before we get to the finishing point. So I'm going to get cracking with that now. Okay, so that last, there's 2 rows that I just recorded myself knitting, so I did 1 garter repeat, and that's taken me just over 8 minutes to knit back and forth those 2 rows. So these rows are starting to get quite long and lots of stitches. So yeah, that last clip will probably have been sped up and maybe even trimmed a little bit just because it's quite long. So I'm going to keep knitting and working on this transition section and then the following section afterwards, and I'll show some little clips here and there of me knitting on it, but it's going to be much of the same thing. And yeah, I'll check in again when we get to the end of the next contrast colour for the following transition section and see how we're doing. Okay, so just finished this first transition, the second transition section, and yeah, so that's what that looks like. You just go straight from your first contrast colour to your second contrast colour and bring back that main colour yarn for this transition. Now that I've done that, I have cut my main colour yarn. There's the tail, and the contrast colour, the second contrast colour, now this yellow, is still attached, and I will be knitting my next garter section with this colour, remembering to finish when my stitch count between the first and second and the third and fourth are a multiple of 10. Hey guys, so checking in again with this shawl knit along, or knit with me series. I've now done most of my section 5, most of my section 5, and I have 2 more garter repeats left until my stitch count is the right stitch count to be a multiple of 10. But this is all the yarn I have left. Where's my yarn ball gone? There it is. this is all the yarn I have left. Now this might be enough to do 2 more repeats, it might not be enough, and because I haven't been weighing it as I've been going along, I'm not 100% sure. So I'm going to do what I mentioned earlier for the next repeat. So I'm going to do an extra set of increases. So normally you increase 4 per right side row when you're knitting this pattern, the garter ridge pattern, or just the garter pattern, sorry. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase 8 on this row. So I'll do the 4 regular increases at the regular points, and then a few stitches after or a few stitches before each of those regular increases, I'll do an extra increase. So I'm just going to space it out, probably, you know, like I'll do the first increase, then like 4 or 5 stitches later I'll do one more, and then 4 or 5 stitches before the next increase I'll do another one, and then the same again on the other half of the shawl. So that way I can get the next repeat done, and then I'll know for certain I have the right stitch count. And then if I think I might have enough for another repeat, then I can just do another repeat without any increases and I'll still have the same stitch count. But I highly doubt, once I've done one more repeat, I don't think I'm going to have enough for another full repeat. I might have enough for like 3 out of the 4 rows in this ball right now. I don't think I have enough for 4 rows, which is why I want to do the extra increases just to be safe, and so I won't have to rip back and re-knit it. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I thought I would explain that again here really quickly so you can see what I'm on about. Okay, so I actually did the 1 garter repeat with the extra increases in it, and I actually have more than enough to do another repeat, it seems. So I'm just going to do one more garter repeat without doing any increases this time, since I did the extra increases previously. That was more just like an insurance policy, as it were, because I wasn't weighing my yarn. If you are weighing your yarn as you go, and especially when you get towards the end of a section, you can weigh your yarn and see how long it's taking you to knit, or how much yarn is being used for each repeat. Then by weighing your yarn, you'll have a much more accurate idea of how many more rows you can knit. So if, say for example, 1 garter repeat takes 5 grams of yarn, then if you have, I don't know, say 11 grams left, you know, okay, well, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be able to get 2 more garter repeats out of what I have left, you know. So because I'm not weighing, I'm kind of eyeballing it, and apparently I'm not very good at estimating how much yarn I have left. So I'm just going to knit 1 more row without increases, and then we're going to be ready to move on to the next transition section. Okay, so garter section is now finished. I've cut the remaining yarn. There was actually a little nugget of yarn left, so that is fine. I probably could have got another row or 2 out of it, so but I didn't want to. It's getting long enough already, like these sections are getting quite big. So I'm going to now transition to the next section, and I'm going to repeat what we did at the beginning of the last 2 transition sections. So now I've cut what was my second contrast colour yarn, and I'm going to start working with my third contrast colour yarn, and then bring in the main colour yarn for these textured rows. So just going to crack on with that now. Alright, so I've actually finished knitting this last contrast colour section. So I think this is section 7. So you can actually knit this section until you have no yarn left. There goes Derek. Until you have no yarn left. I actually, based on how much yarn was in this cake before I did the last 2 rows, I'm not sure I actually have enough to do another 2 rows, because there are so many stitches on the needles now. I think I'm at around 450 odd stitches. So I think there's too many stitches on the needle now to do another 2 rows. So I'm actually going to stop here. But at this point, when you get to the end of this section, you don't have to worry about what your stitch count is. So you can literally go up to as far as you can. And then we're just going to cut the yarn, and we're going to continue doing the garter pattern just with our main colour going forward for section 8. So I'm going to end this video here. Thank you so much for joining me for this section, and I will see you guys in the last video for this series, where I'm just going to finish knitting the last section, section 8, and then we'll do the bind off together and how I wash and block the finished shawl. So I'll see you there.